Hi, friends. I'm Kirk.
And I'm Zach, and this is the Gardener's Companion podcast.
Each week we have gardening tips
Potential pitfalls to avoid.
and a community where we can share, learn, and have fun growing together. In this week's episode, we are going to talk about soil and germination slash transplanting. So let's dive right in talking about soils. The first part I want to talk about is your native soil. Depending on where you're listening from, depends on what kind of soil you have. Us here in Central Florida, we have a very sandy soil. So it's not great to grow in, but we always have opportunities to amend it and make it into something.
Yeah, and in general, there's a lot of resources out there for figuring out what kind of soil type you have, and we'll throw those out kind of as we get deeper into this. But one thing to know is you can grow in basically any soil. There's just a difference on what you will have to do to be successful there. And so that's where it really helps to kind of look at how your soil behaves and figure out what you need to do so that you can be successful. Like Kirk was saying, we are mostly sand. What that ends up translating to for us is all nutrition and water and everything goes absolutely straight through.
Yep.
You get rain on it, it goes straight through the sand and goes out. Same thing with all your fertilizers. So essentially you put your fertilizer out, the next time you get water or rain or anything, it is going to pull a large majority of that fertilizer straight out the bottom. And so those are things that you can work around. But sand is one of the major components of soil. Another one is clay. It's a very common one. If you see that really orange color around your area a lot, that would be something where you probably have a high level of clay in your soil. That's another interesting one because clay is very, very good at retaining moisture and then also retaining fertilizer.
Sometimes too good at retaining moisture.
Yes, it can cause you problems the other direction where you're holding all of this fertilizer and all of this water, and it can be bad for your roots. But at the same time, the amount of food that's just available at all times in heavier clay soils is way, way higher than like our sandy soils.
And another soil type is silt, and this is usually around big bodies of water or bodies of water that have now receded. This is a more fine, smooth texture soil. It holds moisture good like clay. It's fairly fertile and workable, but it can get waterlogged very similar to clay. We don't have that problem around here. Like I said, we do sandy soil, and it's just drainage all day long.
Yeah, kind of your last little category that you'll see thrown out there sometimes is called loam, where a good way to think about loam is it's basically what most plants want. It's a pretty great mixture of your sand, silt, and clay that works great for your plants. You have enough clay so that you're holding some moisture around your plants. You have enough sand so that you're not holding too much. You have some silt so that you basically get even more kind of organic matter and nutrition in there. And so loam is just, I kind of think of it as a really nice soil for your plants.
I'm not going to lie. When I was putting this together, I was like, God dang, that would be amazing to have loamy soil around here. Because I'm a little jealous of just having that natural loam soil around. Because that's kind of what you're trying to mimic when you're trying to build a garden most of the time, is a good balance.
Yeah.
And that is basically already balanced. And I was looking like, where does it have this magic soil? And a lot of it's like up in the Ohio area, which you think of really good farming area. That's beautiful. Some of the out Midwest. And we're going to dive a lot deeper into that kind of stuff a little bit later on. We found a really cool map that we want to be able to share with you guys in the future that shows the different type of soil types that you can have. There's also a video that we're probably going to make in the future called the jar test, so that you can figure out, and you can Google it and watch a YouTube video from someone else as well of how to do the jar test, which tells you what percentage of all of these soils you have. I don't know how we would make a great video of it because we are all sand, so it wouldn't probably be.
It'll be a funny video. It's going to be mostly sand. I think I remember reading at some point that we're like sub 1 or 2% organic matter in Florida. So it's going to be mostly sand. But mostly we just want to throw out there that these kind of changes exist. Where you live, and honestly, from where we live in Central Florida to North Florida or to South Florida, the soil types are different. Yep. And so we mostly wanted to throw out there that your native soil type has specific kind of properties and then also requirements to have a really successful growing out there. And so we just wanted to kind of put that in your wheelhouse. But like Kirk said, we're going to dig in more on a later episode.
And your soil is very, very important for your plant growth. I mean, it's one of the most important things. That's why we wanted to hit it in the fundamentals of like just the beginnings of gardening, the fundamentals. And it's just one of the most important things. So if you know your soil, then you'll know what to do to have a successful garden. Here in Florida, what we have to do a lot is amend. So that brings us to our next part of the soil segment, which is amending your soil.
Yeah, it's another very common thing that you'll read about on any kind of gardening website, or you might have heard tips from people. And so there's a lot of things that you can do and should do if you really enjoy growing to just try and improve your soil a little bit. Kind of your first one, and maybe your most popular one, is adding compost into your garden or into your soils.
And we will probably do a whole episode on compost in particular, because there is a lot there. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of misinformation about compost. One thing that me and Zach have talked about even off mic was a lot of people think of compost as a fertilizer or as a plant food, and that's not really the case most of the time. It usually has very little fertility. The benefit of compost, and that's why it's very important in our area, is it adds organic matter back to your soil, which, as Zach said, when we're sub 2%, you have almost no organic matter, which means that the fertility you're putting in your soil is just going away. There's nothing for it to grab onto. Mm-hmm. If you've got some organic matter in there, you've got some things breaking down, you've got things, you're building biology, then that helps you to build a kind of microbiome in your soil, so that not only can the fertility hold, but you can also hold the beneficial bacteria that you're trying to hold for your plants.
Yeah, it's a really great inoculant for all your microbes. And honestly, that's another one that maybe a little bit on next episode, we'll get into kind of how you can work with microbiology kind of in your soil to make all of your fertilizers more efficient, because that was the original kind of fertilizer, was microbes in your soil transferring things to the roots. And so you can absolutely use that. And compost is normally loaded with a bunch of and especially if you make it yourself, a bunch of native microbes that are just going to make your grow work a little easier. And then like Kirk said, it's also great for your texture. We're not saying don't use compost. We're saying do use it, but it is not a one-to-one replacement for fertilizer.
Right.
Because there are some plants that eat enough that that is not going to be enough food for them. And so you'll find yourself struggling. But it's not any kind of issue with you shouldn't have put compost. You should have, but you should also fertilize as well.
One of our favorite composts that we have at the shop that a lot of people use is a mushroom compost. It's just full of like really good beneficial bacteria. It's broken down mycelium and things like that just really hold organic matter. It's really dense. And we also love amending with worm castings. Worm castings is chock full of beneficial bacteria. It's crazy how this black gold from these worms, like worms are awesome. I want to do a full episode on worms, because worms are freaking cool. One other thing about amending your soil, and like Zach said, we're going to dig a lot deeper in the next episode, which is about fertilizer and feeding. But try to not disturb your soil too much, like deep tilling, deep turning it over, digging too deep into your soil, because that does mess with your microbial stuff, and kind of, I don't know how to word it, but it can mess up their living space.
Yeah, so a good way to think about it, and there's a lot of data that essentially the government and a lot of agriculture community corporations have worked on, is when you go through and you deep till, you're getting all of those roots that were there. And that stuff is an absolute like sanctuary for microbes. And so when you go through and tear all that up, you're basically disturbing their area. So if you want to look more into this stuff, there's a whole kind of practice called no-till farming. That's kind of the extreme version, the kind of commercial side of it. But the theory there is you let those roots be there for a long time, because there's an ecosystem that forms on like long-standing root mats underneath the soil. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is to let that stay there as long as possible.
Another one of my favorite amendments that we'll talk about a lot more later on as well is biochar. I don't even have it on here on the notes, but biochar is a really cool. It's essentially just charcoal, but don't think of like the briquettes that you get when you're grilling out. It's more like,
Don't throw your
yeah,
Kingsford in
don't.
the garden. It's not going to work the same way.
But it what it does is it has all of this surface area that allows the microbes to colonize within. There's so much room for the mycorrhiza and things like that to just really go wild and have a great time. So when we dig deeper into the biology of the soil and things like that, that's something that we're going to come back to is things like biochar, things like worm castings and stuff like that. So in our area, a lot of times people will buy prepackaged soil, and that is how
Yep.
they will garden. That's how they will amend. That is how they will garden. They will do in raised beds, containers, things like that. But let me tell you something, not all soil is created equal. Trust me, we've learned that the hard way in a lot of ways. I remember the first time we did raised beds on our tomatoes, we cut some corners and we didn't use all the good soil. We tried to fluff it with just really cheap stuff, and we were fighting fertility the entire season.
Yeah, it is one of those things where, to a limit, you get what you kind of put in. So you can absolutely find something that isn't great to start with and amend it up. But there's also fantastic mixes out there now that are going to kind of jump you ahead that whole stage. And the other kind of side of this is there are some people who live in like an apartment, or they don't have a permanent living situation where they want to go install a huge garden in the back. And this is another place where prepackaged soil is absolutely great, because basically you can fill a pot with what would be the nicest possible native soil, and it still wouldn't even catch up to what you can get in a bag. So basically you can kind of skip the amending and go straight to, I'm starting at as strong of a point as I can. And for some people, container gardening is the main way they do it. And so you have a lot of great options out there now.
And there's a lot of different definitions of prepackaged soil, like potting mix. Take, for instance, it's mainly made out of peat, cocoa, and perlite and vermiculite, and it's mainly designed for container gardening. Then you have garden soil / raised bed mix, and that's something that we use a lot. And even sometimes in our native soil, when we're planting plants, we will dig a big area around the plant that we're going to plant, put some really good raised bed mix in there, and then that just gives it a head start. And this one is more, it's more of a full, well-rounded soil. And the one thing that we wanted to mention as well is that we've seen so many people that they've come to the shop, they're struggling with their garden, and they're like, well, I bought, 15 yards of this topsoil from this place down the road, and it was super cheap, and I don't know why nothing's growing. Topsoil / fill dirt is usually really low quality. And so the thing that you want to look for when you're looking at a prepackaged soil is turn that bag around and look at that derived from on the back of the bag. On the back of the bag. Think of it as the ingredients when you're looking at something
Yep.
at a grocery store.
Yeah, and a lot of times your fill dirt, or some topsoils too, is basically if they need to remove soil from somewhere, they can then sell that soil that they just removed to somebody else. And so that's basically what you're getting. It's not some soil that's been cultivated or attempted to be amended so that it's great for growing crops in. It's basically waste soil that they need to remove from somewhere, and so they took it somewhere else. So yeah, absolutely, you can get it really, really cheap, but don't be caught off guard if your
tricked.
topsoil does not, it doesn't grow well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of inputs that you can do to your soil that aren't considered amendments. And we wanted to touch on some of those as well. We don't have to do a lot of this to our native soil because of its drainage. We could add vermiculite, it helps hold water.
I do not recommend that. I'll go on record saying that in Florida, if you have a heavy vermiculite mix, when you get to rain season, you are almost assuredly going to be overwatering your plants.
But vermiculite is one of the things that you can add that will help hold water. Perlite is the opposite, which perlite, everyone just sees these little white nuggets, and I didn't even know what they were for a long time. I mean, I'd been around it my whole life, but I did some research not that long ago. It was actually about a year ago when we were working at Grayson. I'm like, what is perlite? Like, what exactly is it?
It's way more awesome than you probably guessed.
It's volcanic glass. So they literally take like volcanic, I don't know, like sand, and then they heat it up, which makes it like pop and it gets
Like
big.
popcorn.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
popcorn. And it's just, but it helps with aeration, helps with drainage and things like that. It's natural. A lot of people don't realize that. They think it's like, I don't know, styrofoam or something. It's
Yeah.
not. Another
No, you
thing,
can absolutely get organic perlite because yeah, it's just volcanic glass. It's not something strange.
and another thing that you can add or as an input to your soil, or if you're making your own soil, is cocoa, which is kind of a it's kind of a between all those things because it can hold moisture. It also can tend to be, I don't know. Cocoa is its own thing. I don't like
It is.
super heavy cocoa mixes because if it's too dry, it literally will become hydrophobic. And if it's too wet, it takes forever to dry out. So
Hmm.
it's kind of one of those, it's very natural. It's awesome in the right kind of like ratio. So it's,
I a lot of times will use it as an additive. You know, a lot of times. So if I'm doing a house plant, especially one that's doesn't really like water or like a succulent, I'll mix in something like a cocoa perlite mix into a traditional potting soil because then you just make sure that you're getting really strong drainage for something that doesn't want a lot of water sitting on it.
yeah. So I hope that this helps you understand your soils or what you should be doing in your garden because like in our area we don't really grow too much in our native soil when it comes to gardening because one of the main issues in this area, and we're probably going to talk about it so many times on so many
Oh
episodes,
yeah.
is a microscopic organism that is called the root knot nematode, and it will just wreck a lot of your plants. Mainly things that will build big root systems, they will just destroy them. Think tomatoes, eggplant. Heck, I saw some the other day on cucumbers, which isn't even a big rooter, like those other ones, but it was just wrecking their plants.
No, the funniest one that I ever found was beets, which it makes sense. It's basically like a sugar root.
Yeah,
So since they like to have roots, but you pull it up and you know how it has that little tail normally coming off? It looked like it had like a carrot, the color of a beet coming off the bottom of it. I was like, well, I guess that makes sense. This is the first time I've seen that
but
though.
this organism, it will literally sting your roots. It'll lay their eggs and stuff inside, and it makes these, they call them galls. And it's just like your roots that should be, fine, nice roots will look like all these little balls and warts. It just looks really ugly. And it prevents your plant from being able to uptake nutrients. So in our area, a lot of people that they tend to do container gardening, they tend to do raised bed gardens for their heavy rooting plants. You can grow some things in our soil. You have to amend a lot, but there are some things that do well, like tropical fruits, like trees, things like that, citrus. There's a lot of things that will do fine in our soil. But a lot of the farming that is done, and I come from a farming background, the way that they're able to farm is they fumigate the crap out of that soil to kill those root knot nematodes, which is a very, very toxic input. And so it's not something that a regular gardener should be doing, nor can they do easily.
Yeah, I don't think there's a consumer level fumigant
There's not.
available really. It's very dangerous. That's one of the ones where you need to be wearing a mask and like you don't want to be inhaling that stuff. And so there's that's the thing. We grow a lot of things in Florida, but for the home gardener to have success and not have to do anything crazy with chemicals, that's why we a lot of times will recommend bringing in a soil that's not our sandy native soil.
And for context, just a little bit of context, I think it's a little fascinating. In our area, we grow what is called plastic culture, which it was actually invented in Israel to be able to farm in the desert. So that's how sandy our soil is. You literally put plastic down. There's these plastic beds that you're making with a tractor, and there is a drip tape that is a slow feed drip that's how you feed and water your plants. That's how they farm in this area. It's a lot different than what they do out in the Midwest, even a little bit
Even
north. Yeah,
Georgia.
even a little bit north of us, where they just go straight into the soil. It's very different than what a lot of areas do because literally we have to trap that moisture in that bed so that it doesn't continually dry out.
Yeah, it also is the maybe the most water efficient way, and it's just because we have to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, if you were to do something like kind of a center pivot, which you'll see in places like Georgia, all of that water would just immediately go away. So you would have to be you would be using an absolute ton of water. Drip irrigation is very, very efficient because you're just dripping, but you drip right on the root balls and you do it more often.
And another thing that we want to touch on is matching your soil to your plant types. So let's say you're building a soil for the different types of the different areas of your garden. Your leafy greens, they don't need as much of the potassium or the phosphorus. So you want to go something rich that's really moisture heavy because they don't have deep roots. So something that can hold moisture well at the top because like I said, they don't have really deep roots. They need to be able to maintain that moisture level. And most of them are heavy drinkers. Because like you think about a lettuce, it is mainly water. Same thing with like a cabbage and things like that.
Yeah, and then also if you were kind of thinking about root crops or things like that, basically the idea there is you want something loose so that root can form. Mm-hmm. Because basically even if you have two, so let's go carrot as the example. If you have two carrots that are too close to each other, they won't form that perfect carrot. And so that's the main kind of idea on a root crop is you want to have it so that they can fill out that tuber without being obstructed in any way, so you get kind of your best chance of success there.
And then when you're going into something that's going to be a heavy fruiting plant, like let's say your peppers, tomato, eggplant, you want a nutrient-rich but well-draining soil. This is where you really want some organic matter in there to hold the moisture, hold the fertility, because you're going to be feeding a lot on things like that. So those are the kind of matching your soils to your plants, especially if you're doing raised beds or container gardens. Like some people will literally have a different soil mixture they'll do for their veggie bed or their leafy green bed versus their, tomato bed. And that makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah. No, and the requirements are all different. Like we said, we will absolutely talk more about this. And also, feel free to send us a message if you have a question about a specific crop. We'll throw out stuff. We're building out a Discord where people can go and discuss kind of questions like this as well. So we're just throwing out kind of the beginning stuff.
Yeah, we know we barely scratched the surface on the discussion that we can have on soil. We may, we're going to be digging deeper into a lot of these different things as we go on with the podcast. We just wanted to get some fundamentals out there so that people could have a basic understanding of the first steps of gardening. And soil is very important. So a lot of times when we talk about the shop that we work at, me and Zach both work at a garden center. In fact, I'm wearing a hat right now. Grace's Garden Center in Tampa, Florida. It's an awesome family-owned shop that we love. We've kind of become part of their family. They feel like they're part of our family. And we sell all different types of nutrients. And heck, talking about our discussion today, we sell some amazing bagged soil. The thing that I love, Steve, he says, I sell the best soil in Central Florida. And I think he's right. We do.
I think that's
true. We
true.
Sell some of the best soil that you can get in a bag. And we're able to sell it for a pretty good price, to be honest. I mean, the stuff that you can get at Lowe's and stuff is pretty comparable to what we're able to sell, and it's organic. And the inputs are crazy. I love turning that bag over when I'm talking to a customer and explaining all the derived from. It's got this, and this all in one bag.
Yeah, and honestly, the really nice part about it is as we've gone through and done a lot of experimenting with this, we've used the soils up there for starting seeds. We've used it for raised beds. We've used it for fruit trees. We've used it for every possible application. We use it for our microgreens as well.
Yep.
And as you go through and do that, we've had success on kind of all of those different verticals. We've had success without much in the way of an issue that we'd had to address. Like I said, sometimes you lighten it up for a certain plant. That's okay. But in general, we've just had a great, and honestly, when we bring people in, so somebody comes into the shop, they're like, what's a good potting soil to use? I cannot tell you how many times we have talked to these people. We have told them to try this soil. They go home, and then in a couple months, they come back and like, you would not believe the size of the tomato that grew in that thing. It's like, oh, we would. That's why we recommended that soil, because we want you to go out there and have success.
Yeah, and that is the beauty of the shop. And we just wanted to give a little advertisement here in the middle of the episode about Grace's Garden Center because they mean so much to us. They've meant so much for our business as we've been moving forward, and that is their goal, is to help you be a successful gardener, and that's part of why this show was born as well. So I love their ethos. Swing by the shop, Grace's Garden Center in Temple Terrace. It's right outside of Tampa. If you live in Central Florida, you should be coming by the shop. We'd love to meet you.
Come check it out.
Come check it out. And that brings us to the second part of the episode, which is germination and transplant.
Yeah, so these are, once again, it's mostly just relaying the backdrop for all of your gardening goals and ambitions. So you will see a lot of times kind of this question: do I get plant starts and transplant them, or do I start my own seeds? Honestly, it ends up being a user preference thing. Obviously, you're going to be faster if you transplant on the day, but at the same time, if you get a good situation for germinating set up in your house, then you're also going to be able to get a jump on that season.
Yeah.
But we can go through a little bit of stuff.
And I recommend doing a little bit of both, especially as a new gardener, depending on how experienced you are. If you're just starting out, then starting from seed is sometimes a little bit difficult depending on what you're growing. One of the things that I'll say is if you're a brand new gardener and you want to learn how to grow, but you kind of want to learn a little bit of everything, plant your cucurbits from seed, which are cucumbers, squash, watermelons, cantaloupes. You can plant those from seeds. The germination is very quick. It's very, very vigorous once it has germinated. So that's great. But shy away from starting your peppers or your tomatoes or things like that from seed because it's a lot more difficult and it takes a lot more time, which that is the thing right there. Time. The longer it takes something to germinate, the more opportunity for there to be an issue. You have one day where you didn't water the soil long enough, that seed could burn up. Or if it had just started to germinate and it dried out, it could just die. Same with overwatering. If you have put too much water in that soil, that seed could rot before it has time to germinate. Or you could have damp off issues. So the longer a germination window that you see on a package of seeds, that's something you should look at. It's always read your seeds. Look at the package. If it has 3 to 5 days for germination, try it out. If it says 12 to 21 days for germination, you should maybe lean towards a transplant.
Yeah, and so like Kirk said, basically if you throw a yellow squash seed in the ground, you could see that seed popping out of the soil in like 3 days. And so it's a very high success rate. You can go out there and have a really good time doing it. You can see it happen. Beans are kind of the same way, where
we've done
just a few days.
We've done beans before in the shop for a giveaway where someone will request us to do a bunch of beans to give out to kids or at a school or something like that. And no joke, within 24 hours we've come back the next day and they're already germinating, and I'm like, how is it so fast? It's crazy.
The other end of that spectrum, I have absolutely started hot peppers that pretty much took a month. Basically, my experience with starting pepper seeds, you stick them in there, everything else is starting to germinate, and you're like, oh, okay, great. Nothing's happening on the peppers.
You feel like you did something wrong sometimes.
Yeah, you think it's done. You think they're all dead. You think it's never going to happen. You forget about them. And then one day, there they are. It literally can take nearly a month sometimes on peppers.
Yeah, peppers are one of the ones that I'm still dialing those in, to be honest, because like I said, the longer it takes, the more opportunity for issues. So you kind of have to have your systems dialed in really well when watering, light, all of those things. You have to have that stuff dialed in very well to get a good germination on your peppers.
Yeah, it is a tricky. So we'll throw out some of the kind of things that you're looking for best practices. These, I always tell people, this is kind of a process to get dialed in. But once you have it dialed in, you don't have to kind of constantly be redialing it in. The process is up front, figuring out where you're going to grow them, and then kind of light and water. That's in the end kind of what you deal with.
And one of the really important things that we want to touch on, and we're going to talk a lot more about this and the different varieties of seeds and heirloom versus GMO and all the buzzwords that people hear. We're going to dig a lot deeper on another episode. But it is important where you source your seeds. If you're just going to Lowe's and you're looking at the rack and it's got, the really, really cheap seeds that you can get there, don't expect too much. You kind of get what you pay for when it comes to seeds.
A lot of times what really cheap seeds translates to is not great germination rate. So that means that you're going to get some going through. But you're not going to get the same kind of efficacy as you would if you got it from a company who is putting their expiration out there and testing for germination rate and needing like a 90% plus germination rate. Those are usually somewhat more expensive. Not that it's prohibitively expensive.
No,
but
seeds
just
is
a
the
little
cheapest
more
way to
expensive.
go. Seeds is a cheaper way to start your garden than buying transplants. That's just the fact of the matter. But like we said, not all seeds are created equal. Not all seed companies are created equal. And we are not sponsored by any of these seed companies yet. But
Yeah,
we
here's
we
hoping.
do want to touch on a few of them that we trust in, that we've used, and we have experience with. The first one is Baker Creek, really good quality, mostly heirloom seeds. We've had really good germination rates and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then we also have True Leaf Market, which we also use heavily for our microgreen side of things. So if you're ever looking into starting microgreens, that's where we always point
Yes.
people to. But on top of that, you can get a large amount of seeds for kind of a consumer facing type organization. Because, yeah, if you go find an agricultural seed supplier, you can get pounds of seeds very easily. But this is also one that's accessible where you can get like a packet of seeds, but that same packet, you could also get like a pretty large amount for a really good price.
And one of the favorite seed companies that we use at the shop, it's the main seed company that we have in stock at Grace's, is Botanical Interest. And the thing I like about them is they have really cool varieties of a lot of different things. Like you can get some really cool stuff that you can't really get with a lot of the other seed companies. That's what I like about them is their variety. Germination rate's been really well with them too. I've never had any germination issues with Botanical Interest.
Nope.
But and you can look at all, if you don't live in Tampa and you can't come by the shop and get seeds, all of these companies have really good online presences. You can order your seeds there. But like I said, it is important to source your seeds in a wise manner. Try to find a good source for your seeds, something that's trusted, something that it's not always the best to get your seeds at the big box store. Don't go to Walmart and buy your seeds. I mean, if that's the way that you're going to start your garden, sure, do it. But as you go forward and you have time to dig deeper into gardening, look for a good source. Look for a sustainable source, somewhere that's reputable and that's going to be, there for the long haul.
But yeah, all of the companies that he just listed, we have personally used and had great success with. And when we're doing things up at the shop, there's times where we're starting thousands of seeds. It's normally like 2-3 times a year. We're going to start thousands of seeds, and that doesn't even include the stuff Kirk and I do on our own. And so having a germination rate that the company who's selling the seeds cares about is very important to us. And all three of those companies, they have an expiration date. They know when these were batched. It's very, very controlled, and they want it to be known kind of where the expiration lies on these. So it's just really good germination rate. We've had great success.
Now, staying on the subject of seeds, when you're starting your seeds, there's a few best practices. One of the most important ones, in my opinion, and something that I've learned the hard way many times, is make sure you have kind of a sterile media. We've had some issues not that long ago with just bad root rot issues that came in the soil. Like it was just there because the soil was too moist and it had that in the soil, Phytophthora or Pythium. So the seed would germinate and then it would just die. It's called damp off. It's a very similar very common thing. So get a soil lightweight, well draining media. It's not always good to get like a raised bed mix to start your seeds in. You can, and we have, but it's probably not best practice for starting seeds.
Yeah, and I mean, and normally your things that are labeled seed starting mix are going to be a drainage mix because all the energy the plant needs to start is already in that seed. So the idea is you start it in something sterile, and then when you step it up, it'll have all the food it
Yeah,
needs.
then you go into something that's got more fertility, and then it's not gonna be eating for the first little bit, so you don't have to worry about fertility at that early stage. Um, you want to keep them in a warm environment most of the time because they need a certain temperature to be able to germinate. There are heat mats if you're going to do it inside. Some people will use them. I've never had to use them because we live in Central Florida, so it's not a thing that we really have to do. But if you're living up north and you're trying to start your seeds in the winter for your spring and stuff like that, a heat mat might make sense. It's really good to allow your plant to have the first or second true leaf before you think about trying to transplant it into a raised bed or a container or stuff like that, because the common rule of thumb is as above, so below. So if you've got enough enough leaves at the top, that shows that you probably have a decent root system underneath. And so you want there to be a good enough root system when you transplant your plant into its final home.
Yeah, and that's maybe the most dangerous time. So once you have your plant started, you have a couple leaves on there. That is when it's very, very delicate. It only has a couple roots. It's in a delicate spot, so you want to be very careful. And that also kind of includes hardening off before you kind of get into a transplant situation outside in the full sun. All that means is basically you give it a couple more hours of your regular sunlight every day for about a week, just so you don't, because if you take a little tiny plant that you started inside under a grow light and you stick it outside in the full sun, a lot of times it will just burn up. Like, especially the more sensitive types of seedlings, and depending on how big it is, it will just fry. And so if you can take time and just kind of gradually incorporate the amount of sunlight they're going to be getting in little doses, it makes you more successful when you take it out.
Yeah. And if you're planting directly into your raised beds, which you can do with your, like we talked about, cucurbits, your carrots, your beets, your radishes, things that prefer to be planted by seed, then it is recommended to do it in the late evening or early morning while it's better to do it in late afternoon, honestly. Not as much in the morning.
It's my favorite.
Late afternoon is the best time to plant seeds into your area because it's not going to be too hot. It's not going to, you have a better chance of success in that way. And you want to water well. The same thing with transplanting. Do the same thing. Late afternoon is a great time to do your transplants, which we're jumping into the next part of this, which is transplanting.
Yeah, and all transplanting does is it cuts out the everything we just described. So you don't have to worry about how you start your seeds. We recommend everybody try it. It's really fun. It's really rewarding to kind of do it. Like I said, you can also get a jump on the season because when you start thinking, okay, we're getting close to when I can plant this, like the cool weather is about to drop off, you can start those inside and be ready for, as soon as it starts to warm up, you're outside.
Yep.
Plants are ready to go, and you can get as much time as possible. But in the end, starts are also just like a month beyond where you would be if you started with a seed.
Yeah, think of when you buy a start from a garden center or a store. Think of you're buying time. You have bought a month's worth of growth on this plant. A lot of people don't think of it that way, but it's true. That plant has been nurtured and kept alive usually for a month, maybe longer, and that's what you're buying, is you're buying that extra time. Always buy from one of your trusted local garden centers. If you live in Tampa, come by Grace's. We would love to hook you up with some really good plants. But if you live in another community, look for a local garden center. That's what I always recommend. Not everyone has one, but there's another one not too far from us that I would push people if they're living a little bit south from us. And there's a few different options in our area, not a lot. We are the main garden center for organic plants, but definitely look local. The big box stores, they have not a great variety, and honestly, they charge a lot.
It is pretty expensive at this point.
It is weird that, you can come to our shop and get, way more plants than you can at a big box store. I get it because they just have so much die off because the people there that work there that's not their thing, No, and those plants are normally brought in by a vendor. Right. Exactly. And so there's a middleman, that has to make some money. So go to your local garden center. Usually you can get better plants for a better price.
And there's people you can talk to.
And there's people that you can talk to that want you to do well in your garden. And another thing is that has been very frustrating sometimes working at a garden center is people will come in there wanting to grow something off season because they've seen it at Walmart or Lowe's or Home Depot. Mm-hmm. Home Depot don't care what season it is. No. They'll have the plant there that you should not be growing in that season because they don't care about your garden success. We, as a small garden center, want you to be successful. Because if you're if you buy a plant that cannot be grown in season and you are an unsuccessful gardener, you're probably not going to come back and buy more plants because you're going to try to blame us.
Yeah.
Lowe's, Home Depot, they don't really think that way. And plus, they usually, they buy from a vendor that sells to all of the Lowe's and Home Depots. You know what I mean? It's not the same. So we're going to talk next episode about fertility and seasonality, and that's a very important thing, is knowing what season to grow what thing. It's very important. It's one of the most important things, and we're going to touch on it a lot in the next episode. You got anything else, Zach?
No, I think that's about it for this one.
And remember, y'all be kind to one another.
And there is no such thing as a black thumb.